There is something most people never learn. Winning is not emotional. Winning is structured. Winning is disciplined. Winning is strategic. People who win are not the ones who feel the most, they are the ones who can operate independently of emotion. Emotion is loud. Control is powerful. You have a choice. You can react or you can respond. You can panic or you can observe. You can break under pressure or you can anchor yourself. That's the key. Every time you react, you give power away. Every time you respond, you reclaim power. Look at elite environments. Look at athletics. Look at high-level business. Look at military training. Winning isn't about hype. Winning isn't about excitement. Winning isn't about adrenaline. Winning requires emotional neutrality. When an athlete loses emotional control, they foul, they chase, they overexert, they misjudge timing. When a leader loses emotional control, they damage trust, rush decisions, or fold under pressure. When a soldier loses emotional control, decisions become fatal. Emotion is loud. Control is powerful. Let's go deeper. People think emotional reactions show authenticity, but emotional reactions actually reveal lack of mastery. Mastery is not about suppressing emotion. Mastery is about directing it. Discipline directs emotion. Identity directs emotion. Perspective directs emotion. And when emotion is directed, it becomes fuel, not sabotage. This is the essence of Stoicism, not as philosophy, but as working skill. Stoicism isn't about being numb. It's about being unmoved. It's not about silence for silence's sake. It's about silence to preserve clarity. Stoicism is timing. Stoicism is restraint. Stoicism is delayed response. That is emotional control. Let me make it practical. An emotional person reacts instantly and impulsively. A disciplined person notices emotion, pauses, then chooses an intentional response. That pause changes your life. That pause prevents regret. That pause protects relationships. That pause preserves opportunities. You don't need to react instantly. You don't need to defend immediately. You don't need to prove anything emotionally. You need structure when feelings spike. Structure protects you. For example, instead of responding to criticism instantly, step away. Instead of making decisions under emotional pressure, wait 24 hours. Instead of arguing to win, wait until you can speak to solve. That is maturity. That is discipline. When you stop reacting, you start leading. Let's address something critical. The strongest people are not the loudest. They are not the ones constantly explaining themselves. They are not the ones trying to justify every move. Confident people don't explain, justify, or defend. Why? Because their results defend themselves. Their consistency validates them. Their presence proves them. Control makes your silence louder than someone else's noise. Think of someone who always has something to prove, always explaining why they're right. Always defending their intent, always responding to every opinion. That's not confidence. That is emotional insecurity disguised as effort. But now think of the person who doesn't argue, doesn't validate themselves, doesn't chase approval. Instead, they build. They decide. They stay composed. That kind of presence shifts rooms. Silence is powerful when backed by competence. Let me give you 3 practical rules to develop emotional control. Rule 1. Delay every emotional response. Delay is dominance. If something triggers you, wait before responding. A harsh message, wait. An insult, wait. A disagreement, wait. When you respond instantly, you are reacting. When you respond selectively, you are choosing. Emotion is loud. Control is powerful. Rule 2. Never explain what time will prove. You don't need to say you're improving. You don't need to justify your actions. You don't need to convince anyone. Time reveals truth. Let results do the speaking. Let self-respect do the speaking. Let your consistency speak. Control makes your silence louder than someone else's noise. Rule 3. Choose logic over emotion on decisions. Emotion makes decisions impulsive. Logic makes decisions strategic. For example, emotion says, "Do it now so no one doubts me." Logic says, "Do it right so no one can question me later." Emotion says, "They offended me. I must respond." Logic says, "Their opinion has no impact on my outcome." Emotion says, "I must prove myself." Logic says, "I am busy building myself." You have a choice. Emotion destroys progress. Control protects progress. That's the key. Let's address why emotional stability is rare. Because reacting feels powerful. Explaining feels relieving. Expressing frustration feels valid. But none of those behaviors change outcomes. None of those behaviors advance your life. None of those behaviors strengthen identity. Emotion produces a momentary release. Control produces lifelong advantage. Look at leaders. Real leaders never rush responses. Real leaders do not need the last word. Real leaders operate through distance and perspective. Why? Because you cannot guide anyone if you are controlled by emotion. You cannot create progress if you collapse under reaction. You cannot influence outcomes while indulging impulses. Leadership requires self-regulation. So does adulthood. So does ambition. So does success. When you master emotional control, you become unshakable. You no longer crumble when life becomes heavy. You no longer break when someone doubts you. You no longer respond just to prove you care. Here is the transformation. Emotion used as fuel is strength. Emotion used as reaction is weakness. You don't need to stop feeling. You need to stop surrendering to your feelings. That distinction changes lives. Here's the assignment. For the next week, do this. When emotion rises, don't speak. When pressure hits, don't react. When someone challenges you, don't defend. Just observe. Pause. Detach. Assess. Emotional maturity grows fastest in silence. Respond when you are neutral, not emotional. When you begin to lead your emotions, your life begins to shift. You stop making impulsive decisions. You stop creating unnecessary conflict. You stop draining your energy on reactions. And you gain clarity. Presence. Respect. Power. Because emotional control is leverage. Emotion is loud. Control is powerful. Once you master this, your presence changes. Room dynamics change. Relationships become smoother. Opportunities expand. And people will notice not because you say you've changed, but because you respond differently. That's the key. When you stop reacting, you start leading. And when you start leading, you rise above noise. distraction, and insecurity. Now, you've built structure. You've released the need for validation. You've developed emotional restraint. And now it's time to enter the environment where real identity is built: silence. Because silence isn't weakness. Silence is the training ground. So now, let's take everything deeper. Success is built in the seasons where nobody notices you. Not when it's exciting, not when it's visible, not when the applause is loud. Success is built when you're working alone, when the hype is gone, when nobody cares, when nobody asks how you're doing. That's the key, because anybody can work when they're energized. Anybody can show up when attention is fueling them. Anybody can stay disciplined when validation is constant. But the real transformation happens after excitement disappears. You have a choice. You can keep chasing recognition, or you can build results. You don't need their permission. You don't need their encouragement. You don't need their acknowledgement. Consistency without applause is real self-respect. Think about early mornings. Think about late nights. Think about quiet repetition when everyone else goes to sleep. Those moments define you. The real journey isn't dramatic. It's boring. It's repetitive. It's predictable. You will wake up and repeat what you already did yesterday. Not because someone is watching, not because someone is praising you, but because you said you were becoming someone greater. That's discipline. You don't build greatness through bursts of excitement. You build greatness through sustained commitment. Let's make this real. Picture someone training at 6 a.m. Not to take a picture, not to post progress, but because it's the standard they set. Picture someone studying when everyone else is relaxing. Not to impress a teacher, but to strengthen their future. Picture someone practicing skill, failing, refining, trying again. Not for applause, but for mastery. That is where identity forms. Consistency without applause is real self-respect. Let's talk about the invisible season, the period where no one sees effort. The invisible season is where you question whether it's worth it. The invisible season is where doubts rise. The invisible season is where quitting seems reasonable. And that is why most people never finish, because invisible effort feels thankless. Nobody congratulates you for showing up. Nobody celebrates a habit. Nobody claps when you become a little better. But understand something. The invisible season creates the visible future. When you disappear to become disciplined, you reappear as someone people cannot ignore. When you stay consistent in silence, your results eventually speak for you. When you don't rush validation, validation eventually arrives without effort. Let this sink in. The public moment belongs to the private effort. Every breakthrough you admire came from someone who worked when no one noticed. Success is not surprising to the one who earned it. Success only surprises the people who weren't watching the invisible. YEARSTHAT's the truth. Let's go deeper. Your discipline becomes your reputation long before your results do. People don't respect talent alone. They respect consistency. They respect reliability. They respect someone who commits and doesn't break. Your work reveals you long before you speak. You don't need to announce potential. Your habits will reveal it. You don't need to declare improvement. Your actions will show it. You don't need to convince people you're serious. Your consistency does that silently. Let's get brutally. Motivation is the most overrated force in human behavior. It feels powerful. It feels inspiring. It feels electric until it disappears. And it disappears fast. It disappears when you're tired. It disappears when life becomes inconvenient. It disappears when reality challenges effort. That's the truth. Motivation isn't a foundation. Motivation is a spark. And sparks don't last. You have a choice. You can build your life on sparks, or you can build it on structure. That's the key. Most people do not fail because they are incapable. They fail because they relied on feeling ready. They fail because they needed emotional momentum. They fail because they refused to build systems. Motivation makes you believe that you will always feel inspired. Discipline reminds you that your feelings have nothing to do with your responsibility. Let's make something brutally clear. Motivation is temporary. Systems survive. Say it again, systems survive. Think of the last time you started something strong. A new routine, a new plan, a new challenge. Day 1 felt exciting. Day 2 felt engaging. Week 1 felt full of potential. Then the excitement faded. The novelty evaporated. The emotional surge weakened. And with it, your consistency collapsed. Why? Not because you lacked potential, but because you never built structure. Motivation is emotional fuel, but discipline is mechanical execution. And success is not emotional, it is mechanical. When your goals rely on emotion, you quit. When your goals rely on structure, you continue. Look at professional athletes. Look at elite performers. Look at anyone who demonstrates mastery. They don't wake up daily feeling motivated. They execute because their system demands it. Performance is structural, not emotional. Here's the truth. You don't rise to motivation, you fall to your systems. Say it again so it imprints. You fall to your systems. Systems determine whether you act. Systems determine whether you continue. Systems determine whether your life changes or stays stagnant. What is a system? A system is a non-negotiable action, tied to a specific time and done regardless of emotional state. That is discipline. If your routine changes every time your feelings change, you don't have discipline, you have dependency. You have emotional dependency. This is why real transformation requires removing choice. Yes, removing choice. You have a choice until you choose discipline. After that, discipline removes the choice. Want a real example? A person who goes to the gym only when they feel like it trains fewer than 50 days a year. A person who goes 3 days a week regardless of mood trains over 150 days a year. Same desire. Different execution. One depends on emotion. One depends on structure. That's the key. Another example. A person who studies when they feel motivated will never outgrow the person who studies at the same time daily, whether they feel sharp or exhausted. Growth doesn't care about your excitement. Growth cares about repetition. Life rewards repetition. Let's break discipline into 3 categories. 1. Daily non-negotiable. A non-negotiable is not a goal. A non-negotiable is not a wish. A non-negotiable is a decision that is not influenced by emotional weather. Examples: 45 minutes of physical movement, 30 minutes of focused reading or skill building. 20 minutes of strategic planning, a mandatory shutdown time. A mandatory start timid and negotiables shrink decision fatigue. Non-negotiables protect your identity. Non-negotiables harden your self-respect. Because when you do what you told yourself you would do, you build credibility with yourself. Discipline creates identity. Identity sustains discipline. It is a cycle. 2. Consistent condition systems reinforce identity through sameness. Same place. Same time. Same format. Not complicated. Not special. Not dramatic. Athletes warm up the same way. Pilots follow identical checklists. High performers follow predictable patterns. Predictability creates reliability. Reliability creates outcome. That's the key. 3. Tracking truth. Truth is uncomfortable. Truth is confronting. Truth is measurable. Homework. Track your habits for 7 days. No excuses. Just numbers. Write down whether you executed or escaped. Execution builds power. Escape builds regret. You need numbers. Numbers don't lie. Your story does. Your excuses do. Your feelings do. Systems confront truth. Now here's the transformation. When your identity becomes someone who simply follows structure, you stop negotiating your effort. It's not about motivation. It's about commitment. It's not about hype. It's about consistency. It's not about perfection. It's about repetition. You don't need intensity. You need frequency. Intensity impresses people. Frequency transforms you. That's the key. Let me give you the greatest shift you will ever make. Stop believing you need emotional agreement to act. You don't. You don't need enthusiasm. You don't need excitement. You don't need belief. You need action. Action creates belief. Action creates momentum. Action creates respect. Your life doesn't change when you feel inspired. Your life changes when you act without permission. You don't need their permission. You don't need your feelings' permission. You need your standard. Who you become is a reflection of what you repeat. Say that again. Who you become is what you repeat. Not what you intend. Not what you dream. Not what you announce. What you repeat. And repetition requires systems. The silent routine becomes identity. The small tasks compound. The invisible work becomes visible. The unseen effort becomes undeniable. You stop talking about becoming disciplined because you are disciplined. That is power. And here's the final instruction for this chapter. Pick 3 non-negotiables. Attach them to time. Track them daily. That's your system. Don't improve it yet. Don't expand it yet. Just keep it. Consistency precedes optimization. Stability precedes expansion. Execution precedes progress. Your momentum will not be emotional. It will be structural. And once structure exists, life changes. Do not chase motivation again. You mastered the spark. Now you must control the silence. Because motivation fades, systems remain. And systems are what build an unshakable identity. Now that your commitment has become structural, it's time to address the next enemy of growth, public approval. Because disciplined execution is powerful, but silent execution is transformational. And that takes us to the next chapter. There is a quiet addiction that destroys more potential than failure ever could. It's not laziness. It's not fear. It's the addiction to validation. The addiction to being seen trying instead of being seen succeeding. The addiction to announcing effort instead of completing effort. That is what prevents transformation. Most people don't want progress. They want recognition for intending to progress. You have a choice. You can announce your goals, or you can execute them, but you cannot do both. When you announce your plans publicly, your brain rewards you with premature satisfaction. The applause comes too early. The recognition arrives before the work. Your mind registers victory before effort has even begun. That's the trap. You spoke your victory instead of earning it. And when you receive admiration for the announcement, the urgency to execute fades. You got the feeling of achievement without the achievement. You got the dopamine without discipline. You received reward without results. That's the key. You need to stop telling people what you're going to do. You need to stop documenting your attempts. You need to stop broadcasting progress that hasn't happened. Do the work first. Let results introduce you. Nobody respects potential. They respect outcome. Let me give you a brutal reality. When you post about your goals, people cheer. When you post your progress, people clap. But when you go silent and return transformed, people fall silent. Because real results are intimidating. Silent progress is irreversible progress. You don't need their permission. You don't need their applause. You need execution. There is a phenomenon. That happens when you disappear for 6 months, not because you're hiding, but because you're building. You return physically stronger. You return mentally sharper. You return financially more capable. You return emotionally more grounded. And when people see the change, it is undeniable. Not because you said anything, not because you hinted at achievement, but because transformation cannot be disguised. People can argue intentions. People can doubt words. But people cannot deny results. That's the power of silent execution. Think of someone who talks about starting a business. They post a logo. They post a caption. They post an inspirational statement. They receive likes. They receive comments. They feel accomplished. But nothing is built. Now think of someone who disappears for a season. They say nothing. They quietly build the product, test the service, refine the work, and then show results. No announcement. No ego. No broadcast. Just proof. And suddenly people respect them. Not because they talked, but because they executed. You must stop needing people to witness your effort. Because needing validation weakens focus. Because needing applause weakens discipline. Because needing praise weakens identity. When you work silently, you build self-trust. When you work silently, you build internal confidence. When you work silently, you learn to stand on your own ability. That's the key. Confidence is not found through approval. Confidence is earned through consistent execution. You want to respect yourself? Keep your promises when no one is watching. You want to be proud of yourself? Complete tasks you never announced. You want to transform yourself? Let the world discover the results without explanation. The quiet winner is feared precisely because their effort is invisible. People fear the person who doesn't announce what they're building. They don't know how big the change is. They don't know how far the progress has gone. They don't know when the breakthrough will hit. Silent progress is threat.